Good evening. I'm Nina Denton-Pasinetti, Artistic Director of the Charleston Light Opera Guild. For the past 71 years, the Light Opera Guild has entertained, excited, and inspired audiences with high-caliber musical theater offered at an affordable price. Casts have varied from 2 to 100 in our 254 mounted productions, and the group has provided an outlet for singers, actors, dancers, instrumentalists, behind-the-scenes workers, and volunteers. Founded in 1949, it wasn't until 1959 and the emergence of the former Civic Center Little Theater, now Coliseum and Convention Center Little Theater, that the group found a permanent home for its fall and spring musicals. Summer musicals began in the 1970s. Today, you may see us doing musicals in a variety of spaces, still at the Little Theater at the Coliseum and Convention Center, also at the Clay Center, sometimes at the Culture Center, and often at the theater where we own our own building, the Charleston Light Opera Guild Theater. We have presented a new production and premiered it during FestivALL Charleston for the past 15 years. This year, in light of the COVID-19 restrictions, we are hosting a panel discussion with 3 important musicians to the Charleston Light Opera Guild. Introducing our panel of musicians. First, John Marshall, who needs little introduction to Charleston Light Opera Guild audiences. He has performed with the group for innumerable years since youth. He has also conducted for the last 40 years, and we have worked on nearly 90 shows together, both in Charleston and in professional summer stock. Second, David Patrick. David joined us in 2012 as pianist and accompanist for the orchestra for The Color Purple. David continues to play piano for lots of our productions, but also has conducted 4 productions, both in our Intimate Guild Theater and at the Clay Center. And last, Bobby Hodges Jr. Bobby first conducted productions in the 2000s. We've worked together on about 40 shows, but he also is a multi-instrumentalist that played in dozens of our orchestras and also has been on our stage as a singer, dancer, actor. Gentlemen, I'm going to ask each of you how you've remained musically active during these last few months of social distancing. John.
I think the key word is active. I was working on Footloose prior to everything shutting down. That was the show I was going to conduct this summer. And with that gone, I'm really not conducting for the Light Opera Guild the rest of this year. And I'm also a music director at St. Matthew's Episcopal Church in Charleston, and that has shut down. So being active is very difficult. Basically what I do is listen to my LPs on my stereo at home, and that's how I stay active with music.
I put down my instruments. When we found out that we weren't going to be able to do Memphis, I just really didn't want to do anything for a while. It was kind of disappointing, so I just listened to my playlist. That's it.
Well, I'm a music teacher at DuPont Middle School, so I've been posting music assignments and things for my chorus students and music students and interacting with that. We can't really do rehearsals, but we can still try to keep something up like that. I play piano for 2 churches, and I've been recording music for them to post on their social media and their online services. And I'm trying to start learning how to play guitar, so we'll see where that goes.
John, we've worked on so many musicals together, and we've recently, at the end of 2019, worked on Oklahoma, a production we hadn't resurrected for the Light Opera Guild in 20 years. And I know that was a significant production from the 70th anniversary point, as well as all the people that returned to celebrate with us. Will you just give us a glimmer of what it meant to be working on that production at the end of 2019?
Well, I don't think I've enjoyed anything more. Oklahoma is a very special show because it ushered in the Broadway musical era, the modern musical era. Folks,
We are gathered here to moan and groan over our brother Jud Fry, who hung himself up by a rope in the smokehouse. And then there were weeping and wailing, and some of them mourning.
For such a special event as our 70th anniversary, I don't think we could have picked a better show, and I've always wanted to conduct it. I worked on this show. In fact, I worked on it with Nina in high school years ago, but I've never done it with the Light Opera Guild, so I was looking forward to conducting it. It's a magnificent score, and it also gives our young people today who are not that familiar with the classics a chance to really work on one of the great ones.
Yes, David, we had the opportunity to work together on another classic, not just Oklahoma by Rodgers and Hammerstein, but also The Sound of Music. And that was premiered in 2020, the only production we've been able to do thus far in 2020, and it was at the Clay Center. Now, you shared that it was a favorite of yours since boyhood, so please tell the group what that opportunity was to conduct that in that large space, and it was so well received.
I've always loved The Sound of Music. I kind of grew up on it. It's my mom's favorite musical. I used to watch it at my grandmother's house. And then I saw the Guild's production in 2004 from the audience, so I was really excited when I was asked to conduct it. I really just think we got everything right with that production. We had great leads. The show was led by Rudy Arrowwood, who did a wonderful job as Maria, along with our other principal cast. We had a great group of kids that played the Von Trapp children. There were 7 of them, ranging in age from 7 to probably 17. And I was so impressed with their ability to handle the music. I mean, we didn't simplify anything in that show. We did the harmony the way it was supposed to be done, 5 parts in some parts. And then we had a great ensemble too. Our nuns were fantastic. They had a great sound when you put them all together. And one of the things I was most proud about with the show was the orchestra. I believe it was the largest orchestra we've ever had in the history of the Light Opera Guild. It was 26 people, and it really just gave the show the power and the sort of sweeping score quality that it really needed to have in a space like the Clay Center. We were also able to get the set and costumes from the national tour. So I just really think everything came together well for that show.
Bobby and I worked on a 2019 summer production of Shrek, and we both started out thinking we were not going to like that production. We didn't think we liked the subject matter, and we both fell in love with it. It was a big surprise to us, but we also experienced great disappointment after March 13th when we had to stop rehearsing Memphis after weeks. About 6 weeks of rehearsal, and Bobby really went into the music in depth. It was to be a wonderful production. We thought we would just delay it and be able to pick it back up, maybe insert it in the summer, but no, we have lost doing that production during 2020. Bobby, please share the disappointment you felt, the cast felt, and something about the quality of that show that told the birth of rock and roll.
It was very disappointing. We really did delve into the music pretty deep. It was the first time that the Guild had done this show, and I always like working on new shows that we haven't performed before because it kind of puts everybody on equal footing. Because none of the performers have ever performed it, the directors have never performed it. So everybody gets a chance to learn it from the get-go.
I'm gonna make this poverty disappear.
And we found out on the last day of music rehearsals that we were not gonna be able to perform it. And that was the rehearsal where we actually go through every song in the show. And it was just kind of bittersweet because we were ready to let everybody in the show hear everything all at once, and then we get the news that we're not going to be able to perform it. So it was a letdown. It was a great cast. It was hard to cast because it was a difficult show, but We did cast it, and we had a great cast. I was just really disappointed that Charleston was not going to be able to see that great performance.
As artistic director and choreographer, I've always been fond of challenging musicals that we maybe felt we had to push a little harder to get it cast, to get the choreography, to get the stage effects. Musicals like Mary Poppins, A Chorus Line, Les Mis, Follies, Rent. But I know if I ask these guys, out of all the musicals they've conducted, they'll have a different list that stands out than I would have. And our audience have picked their own lists of largest attendees, and High School Musical tops our list of attendees. And we certainly had great audiences for Mamma Mia, Fiddler on the Roof, and Beauty and the Beast, plus a few others. Our group has only produced 3 musicals 5 times, and those are Fiddler, Guys and Dolls, and The Sound of Music. So they seem to be favorites of someone. Okay, well, let me put these guys on the spot and ask what stands out in their mind about the musicals that they have musically directed for the Light Opera Guild.
Okay, well, I can't narrow it down to 3, so I'll give you 8. Sister Act, The Color Purple, Ragtime, The Wiz, Spamalot, The Producers, and also 42nd Street. 42nd Street was in there because I got to be involved in that 3 times. The first time I was in the show, the second time I played in the orchestra, and the third time I got to conduct it, so I got to be really intimate with 42nd Street. But I love all of these shows. I would do them all again in a heartbeat.
I have a much shorter list because I've only conducted 4 shows, but of those, I would say The Little Mermaid was pretty special because it's my first show that I actually got to conduct the orchestra, and it was at the Clay Center, and there's really something special about performing a show like that and hearing the reaction of the kids in the audience and all that. And I love Disney anyway, so that was a special one. But really, I think my favorite experience of directing a show was Bright Star, a show that we did here at the Guild. And the thing about that one was not a lot of people had ever even heard of the show before we did it. And it's really interesting to kind of bring that to an audience who's never heard of the show before. Really well received. Again, I think we cast that one really well, and it was really kind of a different show. We had an on-stage sort of bluegrass ensemble, a lot different than a lot of shows that people see. So I think Bright Star was definitely my favorite directing experience.
Now, when I'm asked to give favorites, I always try to avoid that question because I've conducted so many musicals for the Guild over the years, and I've loved a lot of them. But if I had to pick 3 that really gave me a wonderful experience and a great something to really be memorable, I would have to choose probably Gypsy, the great Julie Stein, Stephen Sondheim musical, which has one of the greatest overtures ever written. And I'm very proud of Les Miserables, the work that I did on that, and the fabulous orchestra that I had and the wonderful cast. And then I would say more into the modern area, the jazzy area, I really loved directing Chicago, the musical.
John, I know that we have done a production of Annie with the Light Opera Guild 4 separate times, and I believe you've been involved with all 4, which have been big crowd pleasers, whether they're at the Little Theater or the Clay Center. You played the role of Daddy Warbucks the first time we presented it, and I believe you conducted the other 3. Other than Annie, can you tell me what a musical needs to possess to pique your passion?
Well, I was never exposed much to operetta growing up. In my house growing up, it was musicals, and I love musical comedy. I love shows that have great music, but also have a great book, a funny book that will make the audience laugh. Shows like The Producers, shows like A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum is a hilarious slapstick script. And it's great for the actors, the performers, as well as the singers. But you know, you run the gamut, the styles, the different styles. I don't have one that particularly appeals to me more than the other, but I do really love the musical comedy.
Okay, Bobby, I know you and I have worked on some cutting edge shows, some mischievous shows from the Full Monty down, but what does a musical have to possess to pique your passion? What style musicals do you prefer?
Comedies are pretty important to me, but I also like shows that have a lot of dance. If they're heavy on dance numbers, I really, really enjoy those. It really gives the orchestra a chance to shine, because usually the dance numbers, you're not going to have a lot of vocal parts, so you're being entertained by the dancers on stage, and you can also enjoy the orchestra. So that is one thing that I really, really enjoy in shows. So if you give me a comedy with a bunch of big dance numbers, I'm happy.
David, I know we've worked on shows that are both fantasies, and then we've worked on some that are spontaneous with audience input, and we've worked on some classics. And I might add to everyone listening that we have done really well with classics, from the Oklahoma to the Sound of Music, to others that we've done in the last few years. So we like bringing them back for young people to know what they are, but the majority of our shows have been newer classics or cutting edge or unknown productions in the last few years. What is your favorite style of musical theater? Do you have a favorite style?
I really like a wide variety. I love big shows at the Clay Center and the sort of medium-sized shows at the Civic Center, but I think shows that I've really connected with are the smaller, sort of intimate shows that we do here at the Guild Theater. And that, first show I ever directed was 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, which is just hilarious, and there's audience participation, and that's just a really funny one. But then, like I mentioned earlier, Bright Star is a really special show, really emotional. Everybody in the show is truly part of the ensemble, especially in our production. You have everybody really has their part that they do, whether it's moving things around on the stage, interacting with the orchestra on stage, things like that. And then, like Nina said, I have played for over 20 shows with the Guild. So one of my favorite accompanying experiences was the show The Bridges of Madison County, which was also performed here at the Guild Theater. And I just think that show is so special. Great music by Jason Robert Brown. Small orchestra, but really well orchestrated. And I just think there's something really neat about, you strip away all the big sets, all the hoopla and all that stuff, and you just have a really intimate show that has a lot of emotional depth that you can really, dive into those feelings of the show. And those are the shows I think really that I like the most.
I'd like to bring the president of the Light Opera Guild's Board of Directors into this conversation. Please meet Scott Jarrell. Scott, please describe how the group selects the shows it does each season.
So, as you know, show selection is often one of the questions we get asked the most here at the Light Opera Guild. And it's a tedious kind of thing that we go through. There are a lot of factors that we have to take into account whenever we're choosing shows. One of the main things that we have to think about is where the show will be performed. So usually at the beginning of the year, we have dates for the Light Opera Guild Theater, we have dates for the Charleston Coliseum and Convention Center Little Theater, and we also have dates for the Clay Center. So those dates are set in place. So at that point, once we know the locations for our fall, our spring, our summer shows, then we can look and see what shows fit into those specific venues. We do get a lot of suggestions from the board. We get a lot of suggestions from a lot of the individuals that have been in the shows, and we also get them from just our general membership. A lot of people will kind of give us some suggestions, some shows that they would like to see us do. We do get some suggestions of shows that the rights aren't available. So you'll hear, Phantom of the Opera. That's always one of the main ones that we hear. And then some of your more popular shows today, like Hamilton. Those shows, those rights aren't going to be available for quite some time. So we look at the shows that are available, and we look at what we've done in years past, and try to see what we can maybe bring back, what shows we can do that are new, that are exciting, and then what we think we're going to be able to cast. So once we sort of have that whole picture together, then we as a board get together, and it can be a couple of meetings. It takes some time sometimes, but we sit down and we go through all of the options, and we vote on what we think is going to be the best season that it can be for the Light Opera Guild for that year.
Some of the shows that appeal to the audience are not necessarily bringing out people for auditions. It doesn't always go hand in hand. So there's just a wide variety of things that have to be considered before this. But now, Scott, with the necessitated cancellation of our Memphis production and our 2 summer shows, Paradise Park during FestivALL and Footloose in August, we hope we can still do ELF at the Clay Center in late October and early November, but there's no guarantees with this COVID-19. Can you give us any inclination? Are we going to move the productions that got canceled to another time slot, or is that a possibility? Any thoughts?
It's a really good question. It has been discussed. We are currently discussing that as a board. And again, we need to see basically where these shows are going to take place in 2021. We are very hopeful that we'll be able to produce ELF at the Clay Center this fall. And then once that is sort of decided, then we'll have a better picture and a better idea of what we can do moving forward. So no, we don't really have anything set in stone at this point, but that is a conversation that we're having.
Okay, back to our panel. Guys, I'm going to take this opportunity to let you tell us what you would like to see the Light Opera Guild do in the next couple of years. It can be a revival, it can be a new show. Probably shouldn't be something we've done in the last 7 years, but anything that you want to mention that you think the Light Opera Guild could handle.
Over the years now, Broadway, it's harder and harder to get some of these newer shows. I know that we worked very hard to get Mamma Mia as well as Les Miserables when we did it. I would love to see us try to do a show like Young Frankenstein. I also, I don't think you have to wait 10 years to revive a show if it's an extremely popular show. A show like Annie, I think that you could do every 5 years because it is extremely popular with people, and people will come out for it. It's usually very successful when we do it.
A couple of the shows that the Light Opera Guild has done before that I would like to see possibly done in the next couple of years. Company, a great Sondheim show, great ensemble cast, Chorus Line, and since we're on such a good roll for Rodgers and Hammerstein, why not South Pacific? I think it's one of their most beautiful scores that they wrote. And as for new shows, there's a couple new titles that are available, Something Rotten, Kinky Boots, Avenue Q, and then Once on This Island, I think is a great show.
Well, Memphis. We have to do it, and I would like to do it as soon as possible, because that way we would have a chance of having most, if not all, of the same cast that we had right now. So that is a definite. I would definitely like to do The Producers and Spamalot again. Those two are just classics for me, and they have everything that I love in musicals. And Sister Act, I would do that again in a heartbeat. So those are just some of my favorites. Yeah.
David, as musical director, conductor, I know you have responsibilities both to the cast and to the orchestra. So let's just concentrate on the responsibilities with the cast for a moment. Are you able to make adjustments to, like transposing to fit the voices of the cast? Do you feel that's an important thing to do? Do you feel you can take liberties with the written music, or it has to be as written? When you're working with a cast of singers, can you tell me, do you consider yourself a voice teacher doing this, or you are only blending them and education of sound has to come elsewhere?
You really have to know your cast and your cast's capabilities. I would consider at some point I'm kind of like a voice teacher. It depends on the abilities of the cast and the age of the cast. Like in The Sound of Music, we have, you know, kids who are 7, 8, 9 years old. So of course you have to kind of give them a little voice lesson kind of thing. But you know, when you're working with people who are professional singers, at that point it's more like coaching than really teaching a voice lesson or something like that. As far as changing things in the score, legally, you're not really supposed to do that much. Sometimes we might add a little something here and there, like in The Sound of Music, for instance. Originally, when Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote it, the title song, The Sound of Music, was nice, but very kind of flat, and it wasn't the big showstopper it was in the movie with Julie Andrews, we'll say. So we wanted to kind of give it that sort of feeling. So we, you know, added some slowdowns and some cello rondo some places, and then we added a key change at the end to really sort of drive it home and make it a bigger showstopper than what it was. So you can do small things like that sometimes to sort of kick up the music and make it more exciting for the audience.
Well, the balance is an issue most of the time. The body mics presents their own problems. We also have microphones in the orchestra, so our sound tech, sound engineer really has his hands full just about every show, because he has to pull all of that sound into a soundboard and give a good blend between the vocalist and the instrumentalist. But on top of that, you have to make sure that the vocalist, you don't have one person that overpowers everybody else. And the same thing in the orchestra. You have to make sure that the different sections of the orchestra blend with each other, along with blending as a whole as the orchestra. So it's very involved and something that really becomes transparent to the audience, but it is something that does take a lot of work to get right.
John, I know this is an obvious question to you, but maybe not to listeners. Can you explain the responsibilities of the musical director-conductor?
Well, the main responsibility of the musical director is to make sure the performers know what they're doing vocally.
Everything's up to date in Kansas City. They're on about as sure as they can go. In a lonely road. But when there's a moon.
And, you know, I think each one of the musical directors of the Light Opera Guild, we all have our own technique of doing things. We all have our way of motivating our cast. We know that you know, not being a professional theater where you can audition and audition and audition until you get the most perfect cast in the world. In community theater, you don't get that. But we work very hard to make our performers sound as good as they possibly can. And you know, as far as motivation, it doesn't take much, because most of these folks that come out for the Light Opera Guild love what they're doing, and they love performing. And as far as the orchestra goes, it's not difficult at all to motivate the orchestra. I think we have one of the finest orchestras around in any community theater. And as far as you know, as far as content goes, I'm not real crazy about changing a book, but I know that on Broadway they will transpose numbers all the time when a new person comes into a show if the original song is not in the key that is really good for them. So I don't have any trouble with transposing music for the score.
I might mention that guild shows are cast by a panel that consists of the show's directors plus a couple of objective qualified individuals. Now, some of the productions don't require triple threats, and some of them do. Triple threats are those that sing, dance, and act. And on Broadway, there's tons of them. In Charleston, West Virginia, there's a handful. So these musical directors have their hands full when they have to teach some of the dancers to sing, and I likewise have my hands full teaching some of the singers to dance. But these guys all enjoy working with a diverse cast, and I would like them now to tell us what their inspiration is in doing a musical. What inspired them to work in music? Because they've all worked in the public school system, or Bobby worked as an adjunct professor at West Virginia State University. So what have been your major influences in a career in music, particularly musical theater?
This is going to sound so hokey, but you know, my actual inspiration for getting involved in music, and especially musical theater, was the Charleston Light Opera Guild itself. I was barely in junior high school when I saw an ad in the paper for the Light Opera Guild's production of The Music Man. And I went to my parents and I said, I've got to try out for this. Please let me audition for this. And of course my family was, especially my mother, was very musical, and Dad said, well, sure, I'll take you down. I don't know if he thought I was going to get in it, but I did. And that was the beginning of everything. I mean, all through my high school years, I did several shows with the Light Opera Guild, Oliver, West Side Story, and it just carried over into college. I just said, I'm going to major in music. I was inspired by the conducting of Donald Riggio when he was the musical director of the Light Opera Guild, and I said, I want to be like him. And so that's what I did.
Basically done music my whole life. I started playing the piano when I was 6. When I was in middle school, I was in band. I played the trumpet. When I was in high school, I was in show choir and did some other singing things. Then I majored in music at Marshall. But I have to say, the thing that really inspired me to want to do music was musical theater. Like John said, I was inspired by the Light Opera Guild. The first musical I ever saw was 1993 production of Annie that the Light Opera Guild did, and I was 5 years old, and I didn't actually make it to Act 2 because I fell asleep during intermission, but I loved it, and it was just, I had seen the movie, but it's so different when you actually see it on stage. And then I continued to see musicals. I saw the national tour of The King and I at the Municipal Auditorium back when they used to have shows there, in Greece, which I like The King and I a lot more than Greece, but and Light Opera Guild shows, and really musical theater is really the thing that I feel the most comfortable in, and the thing that really brings me the most joy.
Well, I was a little bit of a late bloomer to music. I didn't start music really until 9th grade at Elkview Junior High School, and I had, who you would now know, Leah Lewis. She was Leah Dahlmeyer at that time because she was just out of college. So I decided in 9th grade that I wanted to be in the marching band, and so I went to Leah and asked her if I could be in the band, and she said sure. And she said, what do you want to play? And I said, well, my mom played sax, so I guess I'll play sax too. So she said fine, and stuck a sax in my hand, and off I went. And so I did pretty well on it, and after I went to high school at Herbert Hoover, I started learning other instruments, and by the time I got to my senior year, I was playing sax and oboe and flute and clarinet and everything. So I thought, well, my senior year in high school, I had some friends that had performed with the Light Opera Guild, so I decided that I wanted to play in the orchestra, just to give that a try before I went off to college. And that was my first introduction to Nina and John. And it was such a good experience that when I would come home in the summers, I would play in the orchestra, and then once my college days were over, I continued to play in the orchestra and then eventually became a conductor. So that's a brief synopsis of my road to musical theater.
Obviously, anyone who spends as much time as our board of directors does working with the Light Opera Guild, managing the group, and particularly the board president, and also our building takes a great deal of time to keep preserved. They have to have a love of musical theater above just being involved with the group. So Scott, I want to ask you, as president of the Light Opera Guild, what were your major influences in wanting to be involved with the Guild?
So, I mean, much like, you know, our panelists, I have always had a love of music. I was always the kid that would listen to, you know, musical theater in my bedroom just on repeat. Some of my favorites that I always listened to, Phantom of the Opera was my #1 favorite. I loved Jekyll and Hyde. So, you know, just that type of music is what really, just the passion and the feeling that you get listening to some of those songs is what really draws me to musical theater. And actually, the very first show that I auditioned for the Light Opera Guild, was Seussical, and I did not get cast. And so the next show that I actually was able to perform in was Ragtime, and that was 2007. That was my very first show with the Light Opera Guild, and that experience had me hooked right from the beginning. And I knew that it was something that I wanted to do more of as much as possible. Being here in the building, being with you know, these individuals and the years that they've had to really perfect what the Light Opera Guild stands for, that is what has excited me. That's what makes me just so honored to be part of the board of directors and be part of this organization. And it's something that as long as I'm here and as long as it's standing, I will always come and support, audition, and volunteer as much as I possibly can.
In closing, we're regretful that we can't introduce a new production. It would have been Paradise Park for Festival, but we are so pleased that we could do a panel and remain part of this collaborative festival that celebrates the arts. Arts are so important to our lives. They brighten our days, they brighten our nights, and they often change us. So hopefully we'll see you with Elf and Broadway at Home in the fall. Thank you to our panel. John Marshall, David Patrick, Bobby Hodges Jr., and Board President Scott Jarrell, plus Rudy Arrowwood, who is our filmmaker from Kingmaker Marketing Agency.